going to go ahead and call the meeting of the Bloomington City Council to order. If you'd stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing for a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I just want to say, I think this is truly the largest flag I have ever saluted. And I do want to thank the production staff here from BCPA, who are our unsung heroes behind the scenes, for helping to make this and many other things happen this evening. As we move forward, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Mathey.
Here.
Alderman Sage.
Here.
Alderman Malumboy.
Here.
Alderman Burgess.
Here.
Alderman Painter.
Here.
Alderman Schmidt.
Here.
Alderman Black.
Here.
Alderman Harmon.
Here.
Alderman Bray.
Here.
Mayor Renner.
Here. Thank you very much. With our first item under recognitions and appointments, I'm looking for Jeff Juergens. I think we can just hold this over. There is no one to receive the proclamation for the centennial of the First World War, and we're okay with just without having a motion. Okay, so we will hold this over to our next regular meeting, where we will have and we will properly present the centennial for World War I. Under 5B, we have recognition of Trevor Wilson, firefighter, on completing his one-year probation within the Bloomington Fire Department, and I know we've got lots of people here. Chief,
stage right.
And at this point, yeah, I think you can feel free to pop up here on the stage or wherever it is you think is best.
They're coming around.
Oh, they're coming around?
Just a second, so.
They're coming around the mountain. Okay, this is good.
Family, come on. Family, come on.
They're gonna, I'm gonna introduce.
You can hop up this thing. It's really not that bad. I've done it several times.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Bad idea.
Okay. They're all over here.
Enter stage right. Logistics are a little.
It's always tough.
Screwed up. Yeah.
Good.
I always get teary when I see this. Thank you.
There he is. Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Tonight we will be recognizing Trevor Wilson as he has completed his one-year probationary period, and he will be swearing in with the city clerk. I'd like to introduce to you these family members in attendance with Trevor. We have his parents, Lynn and Debbie Wilson, excuse me, his fiancee, Brittany, and his sister, Heather, and his niece, Alana. Trevor and Brittany are planning their wedding this next summer, and Trevor tells me that'll be August 11th. So Trevor Trevor grew up in Argenta, Illinois, near Decatur. He graduated from the Argenta Oriana High School in 2007, and during that time, he was also taking fire science program at Richland Community College, where he obtained his Firefighter 2 certificate. During his time as a volunteer firefighter for Argenta Oriana, he earned many additional certifications revolving around the fire and EMS field, from vehicle extrication to hazmat awareness and operations, and also earned his paramedic license. Trevor has worked several part-time jobs and has a wide variety of experience. He held his first part-time job at age 16 as a trap boy at the Decatur Gun Club. Other work experiences from a maintenance worker at an apartment complex, worked in shipping at the World of Power Motorsports, experience in construction, and then as a paramedic for Decatur Ambulance Service and the Kirby Ambulance Service. Trevor told me that this is his dream job, to work for the Bloomington Fire Department, and that he looks forward to a long and wonderful career. So welcome, Trevor Wilson.
If I can have you to please raise your right hand and repeat after me when I say I, state your name, please. I,
Trevor Wilson,
having been appointed to the office of firefighter
having been appointed to the office of firefighter
in the city of Bloomington
in the city of Bloomington
in the county of McLean,
in the county of McLean,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the state of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the state of Illinois,
and faithfully discharge the duties of the office of
and faithfully discharge the duties of the office of
firefighter
firefighter
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
And while we're sort of standing, I wonder if we could all stand and give all of our first responders a wonderful round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
As my colleague Dave Sage, who I've now quoted, I can't even count how many times, if he had a nickel for every time I quoted him, he'd probably have enough money to pay off our debts, these are the people who run in to our homes when we're running out. And I think that sums it up very well. So we certainly owe them all a debt of gratitude in terms of their 911 service. It's not just about fires. The nature of firefighting and police, the job that our first responders perform has changed dramatically over the years, and we are just so very fortunate to have two very gifted police and fire forces combined. Thank you. At this point, we have two appointments, and if people would stand, there are really only two. Appointment of Monica Bullington to the Connect Transit Board. Monica, are you in the audience? I wasn't sure that she could come. I think she was maybe out of town. So the other person we do know is here, and that is the reappointment of Amelia Burgess to the Bloomington Normal Economic Development Council Board. Thank you for your willingness to serve. At this point, we have public comment, and our Mayor Pro Tem, I'm promoting you already, has put them in my hand. We have a total of up to 30 minutes. And so I'm going to start us at 7:14, give us an extra minute there. And the first is Vicki Tilton, and there's 11. So I will read them after Vicki. I'll read them in groups of 3, so if you'll be prepared so that we can get everybody's comments. And I'm going to have to cut you off at 3 minutes. Thank you.
You won't have to cut me off. Good evening. My name is Vicki Tilton. I'm a lifelong resident of Bloomington Normal. I was born and raised in Normal, but I currently live in Bloomington and have for the last 40 years. This is important information for you to know because I believe that I have a clear picture of both the town and the city, and I claim my home to be Bloomington Normal, not just one or the other. I grew up seeing the competition between the local high schools. That kind of competition is good for sporting events and maybe speech debate, but it's not a healthy concept to cultivate between our cities. This takes us to an item on tonight's agenda, the funding of BN Advantage. I have had the privilege of sitting on the BN Advantage Leadership Council since its inception. It is made up of many local leaders throughout the community, and we have all committed to foster a proactive growth to the local economy through local business expansion and development, new business recruitment, and entrepreneurial action. We have seen some very positive growth in the last year with Rivian, Brandt, and some local breweries. Those are just a few of the things. Those things aren't happening because the EDC and the Chamber of Commerce are sitting idly by waiting for the companies to discover us. They are happening because many people are putting their heads together with their individual areas of expertise to affect the BN advantage. What is the advantage? That's the quality of life, quality of place, and the workforce development we have in place and are growing. The advantages are too numerous for me to go into it in 3 minutes, but there are many, many reasons that people should want to locate in Blono, in spite of the perceived problems with the business climate in Illinois. It is our job to get the word out, and that is what BN Advantage needs to do more of. It needs your support. Division Street does not make us competitors. The competition is outside our region, and we must work together to be noticed and to attract and retain good businesses to and in our community. I'm asking you to approve the funding for the BN Advantage to show your support and respect for the 25 business leaders and the rest of the citizens who are devoting their time and talents in this worthwhile endeavor that will greatly affect the future of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy Shirk, then Deanna Farashi, and Jared Hall.
Thank you. Vicki, thank you for covering a lot of the details ahead of time. First of all, thank you for your service to our community. I know it's been a long night, so I will be somewhat brief, but right to the point regarding the BN Advantage. In the current climate of shrinking budgets and growing expenses, it is imperative that we do not overlook the near-term investments required to enable and promote long-term revenue growth for our community. The BN Advantage Economic Development Strategy has the financial support of the business community, the time investment of both public and private sector leadership, and needs the continued financial and personnel support of the City of Bloomington to perpetuate the acceleration of progress being made. On behalf of a Bloomington employer, Beer Nuts Incorporated, as a property owner in downtown Bloomington, and as a board member of the McLean County Chamber of Commerce, I request a yes vote for funding the BN Advantage. Thank you.
Thank you. Deanna? And then Jared, and then Mason, Alari. Deanna.
Good evening. I'm Deanna Fauci. And the summer I turned 12, over 50 years ago, my mom let me start walking my younger sister to Miller Park, which was over a mile from our West Side home. We were delighted. We sat under the huge maple trees in the park. We ate our peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. We climbed on the cannon. We even swam in the lake. But our favorite pastime was visiting the zoo. The bears, the monkeys, the peacock. Times have changed. People don't let their kids walk a mile on their own, and there are no bears and peacocks at our 126-year-old zoo. But what hasn't changed is people's love of the park and the zoo, and taking their children, their grandchildren, and their friends to these community places. Today, as president of the Miller Park Zoological Society, I often look from the inside of the zoo out with a different focus. The society shares a partnership with the city. We are here as a private partner to help financially support and keep the city zoo going. We share responsibility with you as the council in this effort. We are working diligently to increase our share of zoo funding over time, as we know that the city's needs for other things are increasing. Two of the major complaints by guests at the park and zoo are lack of adequate parking and lack of place to even buy a snack while in the zoo. I find it interesting, too, that about 40% of the zoo's 123,000 visitors last year came from outside of McLean County. Likely they were not only spending time and money in the park, but at other retail facilities outside of the park. If you've ever been at the Spray Park adjacent to the zoo in the summer, you know that parking lot is overflowing. And if you've ever watched families with small children crossing over to the zoo, you know the current road which circles the lot can be hazardous. The new proposed road and parking will take care of this issue since the portion now crossing to the zoo and the planned concessions area will be closed. Today is your opportunity to help Miller Park and the zoo by entertaining a proposal from Jay Tetzloff that will add parking spots for all of the park, including the zoo. It will also add concessions to serve the whole of Miller Park. The enhancements being proposed will pay for themselves over time, so this is definitely a win-win situation. As the Miller Park Zoological Society's public partner, I urge you to listen closely to Jay's proposal. It's a winner for all of us.
Thank you very much, Deanna. Jared, Mason, and then Ed Neves.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Jared Hall, and I'm the incoming chair of the Bloomington Normal Economic Development Council. I'm also here tonight as a member of the business community, asking for your consideration of the BN Advantage funding request. I believe we're making good progress in our pursuit of economic development, and that this strategy is focused on the right fundamentals to stimulate growth in our economy, particularly here locally. Many of our larger private sector employers also agree, given their investment currently, which is ongoing, in BN Advantage. But the reality is funding drives execution, and that strategy works best in partnership with the public sector. I'm grateful for your hard work on this council and can appreciate all the different funding requests that you review given the finite amount of economic resources. But nonetheless, I ask for your consideration to join the private sector in this most important initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mason, Ed Neves, and then Rick Philippe.
Good evening. Before I begin, I would like to ask if I can bring up the issue of the welcoming ordinance. I realize I'm a little late to the jury here, but
you can talk. We've had green eggs and ham read to us, so you can speak whatever you'd like.
I'll try to avoid doing that then at least.
We would very much appreciate that.
Sure, yeah. Members of the council, Mr. Mayor, fellow citizens, I'm sure you're all wondering why it is I've gathered you here this evening. The welcoming ordinance is something that, as a community, we've unwittingly sort of walked into the 3,000-year-old debate about what justice actually is, believe it or not. And we heard a lot of that during some of the arguments that were laid before you just a few moments ago. There's, on the one hand, one maxim that says that justice is giving to each what he is owed, and on the other hand, a maxim that says that certain laws may be broken and violated so long as it is good for the humanity or for the polity. I would highly disagree with both these maxims and would bring before you just two great thinkers who built Western civilization. On the one hand, Plato wrote a dialogue between Socrates and a disciple of his, Crito. Socrates was put on trial, was actually sentenced to death, and Crito came to spring him out of jail. Well, Socrates said, if you can convince me by reason that this is good, then I'll hear you out. In the end, Socrates came to the conclusion that it was the laws of Athens which allowed him to be the man that he is, which allowed him to pursue the good, which as public officials is your very task as well as my own. In the end, it was the very laws that Crito wanted to violate that allowed Socrates to be the man that he is. And Marcus Cicero, not long after him, said that a man who rejects his responsibility is a discredit to his community. Now, I don't accuse any one of you surely for doing that, but I would ask you very sincerely to suggest the weight of such a proposal. I would say, in all honesty, that a welcoming ordinance of this kind is a violation of federal law. To me, the laws that would be violated in a pursuit of this nature far outweigh the benefit as a community of pursuing the good, the true, the beautiful, and what justice actually means. Thank you for your time. Good evening.
Thank you. You have Ed Neves, Rick, and then John Walther.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, Mr. Manager. I'm speaking on behalf of the Miller Park Zoo and Miller Park. I'm currently a member of the Board of Directors of the Miller Park Zoological Society. Item C on your agenda tonight talks about additional parking, closing of a street, and a concession stand at Miller Park and the Miller Park Zoo. Miller Park needs more parking, as Dee already pointed out. Cars are everywhere in the streets and outside the park at any kind of event. Tonight's proposal adds spaces, but also eliminates an unsafe roadway. There's a roadway in front of the zoo right now that has kind of a blind curve coming around by the parking lot. Children and families crossing there. It's a very perilous crossing. This proposal would eliminate that street. The concession stand itself, as we heard, the park does not have a concession stand. I think there's one or two pop machines out in the park, a couple inside the zoo. When people are there, there's just no place to get any kind of food or beverage at all. And the zoo desperately needs a new roof. So while we're putting a roof on the zoo, which hasn't been replaced for 28 years and it leaks a lot, we thought just extend the roof, put a concession stand under it, kill all kinds of, I don't want to say birds since it's a zoo, but accomplish a few tasks at the same time. Let's go with that. But so tonight's agenda solves both problems. When the roof gets fixed, it's a great opportunity to simply extend the roof structure and build a concession stand under it, have it open both ways so it serves inside the zoo and outside in the park. The zoo staff will man the concession on both sides, and the park will be able to serve the many thousands of visitors with sandwich, drinks, and snacks. And most importantly, it'll generate revenue for the city. By the most conservative estimates, the pro forma that's been put together shows a net profit of just under $100,000 per year on the concessions, and it's a very conservative pro forma. At this rate, any monies borrowed would be paid back in less than 10 or 15 years, and then generate additional profits to the bottom line year after year after year. So instead of asking the city for money that's not paid back, this is simply a loan that will be paid back. This is a win for Miller Park, a win for Miller Park Zoo, and a definite win for the city of Bloomington. We ask your support to vote yes on item C. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Rick, John, and then Charlotte Alvarez. Rick. Oh, there he is. Couldn't see it there, sorry.
Good evening, I'm Rick Philippi. I got transferred here with Sears in 1969 after they opened the mall. So I've been here ever since. In 2015, I came to City Council and I showed them the Center Street Bridge, which is trying to collapse because concrete was falling on my car. I talked to Dan Brady, he got a hold of the state. The other day, I was down, I keep going down checking on the bridge. I was down there, IDOT showed up and talking to the people that have businesses along Center Street Bridge on there. They told the lady I was standing there talking to, you have to find an area to park cars because March 1st we're taking this bridge down. I've heard nothing from the city, I've heard nothing from anybody else. This came right from IDOT. They said they're going to relocate the bridge, they're going to reroute the traffic, and that bridge will not be back in use until 2 years. Now, I don't know if they're talking about Center Street and Main Street Bridge, or what if they're going to go two ways with it, and a bike lane, or whatever. I have no idea. But he had the credentials, and it was IDOT, and he was telling the people that own the businesses along that bridge, find some place to park your customers' cars. So, but I haven't heard nothing in the news. I haven't heard nothing from the city. That's going to be a big thing to everybody if that's the case. The other day, they said that part of the IDOT budget has been cut. So I don't know if that has been cut or whatever, but I've kept a real close eye on that because our school buses go over it, our people go over it, and as you see, it's coming down. The thing is falling apart. There's steel hanging out of it everywhere, concrete falling everywhere. And so I don't know what the deal is. I just thought maybe you might know, and we haven't heard anything or whatever, so.
Just to make it clear, we don't comment at public comment, so.
Okay, I'm sure of that.
But there are ways to get a hold of us.
Okay. But that's going to affect the whole town, both towns.
Mr. Karch. You want to come on up?
No, I'm going to go to follow him.
Okay. This is actually... John, go ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is John Walther. I am the great and great-great-grandson of German-speaking immigrants to this town. Now, when they came here, the big subject of controversy was slavery. Unfortunately, we still have that, and it goes by different names like international human trafficking. And I was hearing about the no ICE ordinance that I've been hearing a lot of. I'm sorry I was late for that particular ordinance, but I'm thinking that there's no way of combating human trafficking without the voluntary cooperation of local law enforcement, national law enforcement, and international law enforcement. Municipalities do not issue visas. You must work with the federal government to get UNT visas, which require also the cooperation of local police officers to do that. In putting together the new ordinance, very few of you pointed up here talk about the new Trust Act, and I think many people are not familiar with that particular act. And if you want to put together a declaration or resolution explaining what that is to people, it would be very more helpful than trying to put together an ordinance that, as Mr. Black said, we need to make sure we designate the right title of a federal organization. It's going to be rather difficult to create an ordinance that is precise for that, because ordinances last beyond your terms in office. And it is tricky to write ordinances that stop the police from cooperating with other federal agencies. I do not want people to worry about coming forward to report crime or being the victims of crime, including human trafficking and other crimes. There may be times, though, however, when the victims of crimes must have access to federal agencies. Would you stop a raid against those who are suspected of human or gun or weapons trafficking? Because we just have to protect the slavers and traffickers, because their victims might be deported. Municipalities can't stop that, but we can be a welcoming community for all those and treat everyone with respect. And I think I will leave it at that. I think I've misrepresented myself enough at this point. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and thank you.
Thank you, John. Charlotte, and then Danielle DeWinter, and Gary Lambert.
Hi, good evening. The immigration project was mentioned several times earlier in the session, and I apologize. Circumstances beyond our control made us unable to be here early enough to submit our name for the earlier public comment. So I would just like to point out 3 things about the Welcoming City Ordinance, and I am completely willing, the Immigration Project is completely willing to sit down with each and every council member along with other members of the Keeping Families Together campaign to answer any questions from any councilman, and we've certainly been talking with the mayor. I'd like to point out 3 points. First, the Trust Act, as the name implies, it's supposed to provide trust between the immigrant community and police enforcement, but it falls far short of that promise. The Trust Act states that police officials will not stop, arrest, search, detain, or continue to detain immigrants based solely on immigration status unless there is a judicial warrant. It does not cover wide swaths of behavior and interactions between police departments and immigration enforcement. And in fact, the Trust Act was cut back over and over again in order to be passed. So despite the passage of the Trust Act, it's not a matter of just educating people on what the Trust Act entails. It's a matter of creating a policy that actually creates rules around the interaction between the police department and ICE officials as it relates specifically to immigration enforcement. The Trust Act says nothing about whether Bloomington police or other police forces will participate in raids in our communities, if they will set up barriers or cooperate in crowd control at ways or workplace enforcement events. It says says nothing about whether the police department will ask about immigration status, and it says nothing about whether the police department will talk to ICE and immigration enforcement officials about the status of our residents. So despite the passage of the Trust Act, there's still work to be done in order to actually foster the trust that is implied by that state law and have enough behind it so that we can actually say that our immigrant community should trust our local police force. I'd also like to point out the language of our proposed ordinance. Section 4 says the city shall not spend municipal resources, including time, to assist in any immigration enforcement operations. So this is the narrow language that the council is searching for. The police under this ordinance can talk to the ICE officers related to a human trafficking case. They can talk about drug enforcement. They just cannot talk about immigration enforcement. Immigration enforcement is distinct and different from other parts of federal law enforcement. It tears our families apart and should only be conducted, and immigration law should only be analyzed by people who are federally trained to do so and not have any interaction or any communication between our police force and immigration officials as it relates to immigration enforcement. So that's what we're looking for in this ordinance, and we hope that you pass it and take that into consideration.
Thank you, Charlotte. Danielle DeWinter and Gary Lambert.
Hi, my name is Danielle DeWinter. I'm also a staff attorney at the Immigration Project. Like Charlotte said, I apologize for us being tardy earlier. So I'm also here to clarify a few things. Hopefully, U visas. So a few of you had some questions about U visas. I have to admit, Chief Hefner and the Bloomington Police Department are great at certifying U visa certification requests. Let me explain what a U visa is. So it is a form of immigration relief for individuals who are victims of violent crimes in the United States and assist law enforcement in detecting, investigating, prosecuting said crime. Now, part of applying for the U visa is to get this certification, which Bloomington Police Department is willing to look into, and they do. The ordinance would set this procedure as in stone to continue on in the future. It does not give immigration status at the moment, and it does not protect individuals from deportation. They're still at risk for deportation while that is pending. Now, as to speaking about fingerprinting, we do send clients to Bloomington Police Department to get fingerprints after a consultation, after careful consideration, and we do send a variety of individuals with immigration status. We even send citizens because it's the only way for us to get immigration history. The client's immigration records does not give any form of immigration relief. The last thing I want to talk about is actually a client case. Some of you asked about if there were any cases of deportation in Bloomington. So a few weeks ago, we actually did have a Bloomington resident deported. They were stopped by Bloomington Police Department, and because their child had unbuckled their seatbelt, and were arrested. Some may argue, I don't know what encountered the arrest instead of a citation, but they were arrested, brought to county, because they were undocumented, put into ICE detention, and subsequently was deported 2 weeks ago. All this has happened since September of this year. So it was very quick. Those children are now with their abusive father. We have family law attorneys who we've referred to try and remedy this situation. But I did want to give an example of someone in our town who has had this issue, and not only that ripple effect of their family members knowing what happened, their friends knowing what happened, and that fear that's still instilled in the community. So this ordinance would help to build that trust back up. So please, like Charlotte said, come to us with any questions. We're happy to work with any of you on specific language, but we do think it's necessary to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Gary Lambert.
I'll be very quick. I'd just like to commend Chief Hefner for his reasoned and factual explanation of the current situation regarding the proposal. I think I agreed with everything he said. I think there's a lot of goodwill, do good, feel good, trying to get going here with no real problems. As I read through that, and I'm certainly no lawyer, I think it was 5, I didn't write it down here. It said, Bloomington Police to receive training in potential consequences of any police investigation or arrest, including but not limited to immigration consequences. Now, the way I read that, you could have 2 individuals committing the very same offense. For ridiculous, let's call it jaywalking. We could be walking across the street together. The citizen could be arrested, fined, or whatever. The illegal immigrant, if that was taken into consideration, would not be arrested or fined. That would in effect be giving not equal status under the law, but special status. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to move right along to our consent agenda. Are there any items that any member of the City Council would like to have removed from our consent agenda?
7B.
7B as in boy. Anything else? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with the exception of 7B?
So moved.
Moved by Alderwoman Howman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Schmidt. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Matthey?
Yes.
Alderman Sage?
Yes.
Alderman Malamoy?
Yes.
Alderman Burgess?
Yes.
Alderman Painter?
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt?
Yes.
Alderman Black?
Yes.
Alderman Hallman?
Yes.
And Alderman Bray.
Yes.
Now, I don't think I could possibly imagine why you would want to recuse yourself from item 7B, but go,
Step into the wings.
go ahead.
Move for approval of 7B as presented.
Moved by Alderman Sage, excuse me.
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Painter. Any discussion?
Yeah, I want a thorough discussion on that one.
I'm sorry?
I'm just kidding.
Oh, I didn't even hear what you said.
Rule me out of order.
That's a robust discussion.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Matthey?
Yes.
Alderman Sage?
Yes.
Alderman Malamoy?
Yes.
Alderman Burgess? Alderman Painter?
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt?
Yes.
Alderman Black?
Yes.
Alderman Hallman?
Yes.
And Alderman Bray.
Yes.
There were several dangling chads, but we managed it. Okay. We move on to our regular agenda, item 7.8A. We have a comprehensive annual financial report as audited from fiscal 2017. And just to, for the record, so that everybody is clear, our fiscal year currently is fiscal 2018. We're preparing our budget for fiscal 2019, and our fiscal year runs from May 1st through April 30th, just to clarify. So this is the budget that finished as of April 30th.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, good evening. It's good to be with you. My name is Jason Coyle. I'm a partner with Baker Tilly, which is the firm that conducts your annual audit. So I'm going to go over your comprehensive annual financial report. I don't know if you have a copy with you right now or not. I'm just going to touch on a few things in here. I know you guys have a long night, so I'm going to try to keep it rather brief, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask. You know, before I start going into the document, I do want to thank your finance department. The audit went very smooth as usual. You may or may not know that soon before we began our audit, one of our key audit contacts in the finance department left to go to an employment somewhere else. So always a little hesitant as the auditor walking in, wondering whether or not everything will be prepared, and everything went just as smooth as it always has. So really want to give some a shout out there to the finance department for that. So you do continue to issue a comprehensive annual financial report, known as a CAFR in short. It's a meatier document, if you will, than you're actually required to issue as far as financial statements on an annual basis, but that's great because there's a little bit more information in here that just lends to a higher degree of transparency of your operations. The only thing in here from my firm starts on page 1 and goes for 3 pages, and that's the audit opinion. And your audit opinion is what we call an unmodified audit opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can give over your financial statements. This is a slight change from last year, as you may recall, because last year we were not able to give an opinion on the Coliseum activity because of the events that occurred at the Coliseum in that year. But this year we were able to conduct a complete audit of the Coliseum activity, and so our opinion is, as I said, unmodified. Right after our opinion, there's a section called MD&A, which stands for Management's Discussion Analysis, and I understand not everyone wants to read through a 175-page financial statement, so I'd encourage you, if nothing else, to take a look at that little section called MD&A. It kind of highlights and summarizes what went on during the year and has some nice summary tables and some nice charts. I'll just touch on a couple points of your financial statements. The first financial statement is what we call your statement of net position, which is on page 19 and 20. This is where we really take all the financial activity of the city and combine it down into just a few columns. And also on this statement is all your long-term debt and all your capital assets, so your infrastructure and your roads and things like that. And within the last couple of years, one of the new items that was on this statement was your net pension liabilities. That wasn't on here in the past. And as you can imagine, that's a rather large number. It's about $148 million for this fiscal year end. And what that leads to is a negative unrestricted net position on this statement, and that's on the bottom of page 20. If you didn't have that net pension liability placed on your financial statements, as it wasn't just a few years ago, that would have been in a positive position. So I just kind of wanted to point that out. And when that went onto your financial statements a couple years ago, that wasn't a new liability. It just wasn't required to be reported before the last couple years. So flipping over a couple pages, then I want to talk about some of your governmental funds. This is on page 28 and 29 if you have it. Overall, your governmental funds went up $4.3 million in fund balance. And your primary fund, which is your general fund, had an increase of $2.7 million for the year. So one of the ratios I always like to look at is the ratio of your fund balance to expenditures in the general fund. And right now, at least as of April 2017, that was at a ratio of 28%. Flip over a couple more pages to pages 35 and 36, and these are what are known as your proprietary funds, which for the most part, these funds are meant to be self-supporting, so the charges for services that you have for things such as water and sewer are meant to support the funds. And some mixed results with that, if you will. So I always like to look at the operating income line to see if indeed your charges for services were meeting the operating costs. And in some funds, such as the water fund, that is indeed occurring. And then there's some other funds, such as the sewer fund, which it did have a slight operating loss for the year. And I'll touch on one other page in here, and that's your pension funds, and that's on page 42. The market goes up and down, as you know, and a lot of the investments in the pension funds are in the stock market and other mutual funds. And so as of April 30th, 2017, it was a good year for the stock market, so we saw an overall increase in the assets set aside for your pensions by $14.8 million, which if you were to look back a year prior, you would have seen a negative amount there. So we always like to see when the stock market goes up, and therefore helps the pension funds of our local government. So, and with that, I will open it up to any questions you might have, or I'm happy to go into more depth of any area as well.
Thank you very much. Questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for your very thorough report. We very much appreciate it. Thank you. We move right along to consideration of an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2018 budget for the Grossinger Motors Arena in the amount of $375,000. We have a brief 5-minute presentation by Ms. Cannon and a very briefly budgeted 5-minute council discussion.
Thank you very much. I have a very short presentation. I have provided you with the forecast budget for the rest of the fiscal year, and I have a few points that I'd like to cover as far as the variances that we see going forward, and including up to today in the fiscal year. Starting with the revenue side, we did have 5 of the Flying Aces games that were scheduled in the fall that did not play in our arena. There were 6 total that were not played. 4 of them were played elsewhere. One of them has been rescheduled for January 2nd, which is a Tuesday, and the 6th game is still currently unscheduled. So I'm not sure if that will play here in Bloomington or if it will be rescheduled in another city. But we will see a loss of the rent revenue from that, as well as all of the ancillary income that we would have had from concessions. And then the largest variance we see to date is in naming rights and sponsorship. And that category partially was budgeted for the naming rights to be at a higher level than it was signed for in the summer. However, we do have a naming rights sponsor, which I think is a big benefit. Some of the naming rights revenue in this first year was dedicated to the new signage for the building and some of the interior signage for directional signage. So not 100% of that funding was spent directly as a sponsorship. It was spent somewhat for the actual building itself. Looking at expenses on the other side of the ledger, we did have more than $200,000 in expense reduction in categories such as payroll and occupancy costs and our general expense fund. So we have been very careful in making sure we're not overspending wherever we can. The building is quite large, so occupancy expenditures, even just in having the utilities, we're being very careful in making sure the lights go off when they're supposed to be off. We're making sure that we're keeping our payroll at the level of need and not extravagant. We're just trying to do our best to keep our costs as low as we can and keep our funds as low as we can so that we can continue to operate that facility in the best, safest, and clean manner that we can. So that's my short presentation. I know that the PowerPoint is currently being booted up, but in the meantime, I will take any questions that you may have.
Questions of Ms. Cannon?
I have one.
Alderwoman Hammond.
Lynn, you talk about in our materials, it says a busy season is coming up. Is the busy season for the arena only 3 to 4 months?
No, actually, we should have been much busier in the fall. Unfortunately, due to some of those other events, such as those 5-6 hockey games that did not happen, we were much slower in the fall than we should have been. Normally, we would start getting busy in September and be busy straight through to April. Right now, we're looking ahead, and we see that our activity is picking up dramatically starting at the end of December.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Boca.
Thank you. Lynn, I looked in the report and I noticed that you talked about unforeseen circumstances that occur with regards to sponsorships and suites, but there wasn't a lot of detail about what those unforeseen circumstances are. Could you explain?
Sure. We've one of the things that we've recently had is a new sales manager that got hired in October. So we have a new person that's learning the business, learning the area. He is from Central Illinois originally, but he has most recently been working in the Chicago market. So he is, just getting off the ground now on sales for sponsorships and suites. We do battle some of the news stories with, getting people to commit to us as far as sponsors are concerned, but we are working diligently and getting out on the street and making sure that we're making the best case for the opportunities that exist in the building.
And would you say it's just the news stories that you're battling with those for those suites?
From anecdotal stories at this point, that is one of the key concerns.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Thank you. Thank you, and I appreciate the presentation, although I see it's now kind of coming up here. That's all right. I recently had the opportunity to meet with you to kind of talk about some of the things, and I really appreciate learning more about what you're doing and how we're really focused on turning the arena around. I know that no one's really jazzed to spend almost $400 large on this at this point in time, but I'm ready to invest and make sure that we can make our quality of place and quality of life top notch. I know the mayor would be more than willing to do any dunk the mayor, score a goalie on the mayor, whatever it would take to drive people to come in.
I'll do it.
Exactly. All right. Well, I'm putting that on the books.
There's some people who pay a lot of money.
Yes.
Yes.
If that'll balance the budget, you got it.
All right. We'll get some dates on the calendar.
It's on public record, so with that, I'll make a motion that we approve as presented.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Second by Alderwoman Schmidt. Further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Matthey,
Yes.
Alderman Sage,
Yes.
Alderman Molomoy,
Yes.
Alderman Burgess,
Yes.
Alderman Painter,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt,
Yes.
Alderman Black,
Yes.
Alderman Harmon,
Reluctantly, yes.
and Alderman Bray.
Yes.
Okay, we move right along to item 8C, and we start with a 10-minute presentation by Jay Tetzloff, Director of Parks and Recreation, and then we have budgeted approximately a 10-minute council discussion. Mr. Tetzloff, I'm going to turn it to you, and very interesting tie.
Thank you.
Very festive.
Old, but Christmas tie. So thank you for the time. I do have a presentation behind you. It's really bright to see. So I guess I picked the wrong colors for this building. So I'm going to give you an overview of the project. We can go to the next slide. Hopefully it gets better. Next slide, please. There you go. So basically an overview is trying to think outside the bar, or outside the box, excuse me, when it comes to coming with projects to you. I attended your council retreat, whatever that time was, November, at the Den, and I heard about the priorities of, from our department, the zoo being part of that. I also heard and know of our deficit, so the idea is coming with funding, and I don't get to do that very often, is to bring projects with the funding. So the biggest thing to take away from this is a loan that we're looking for, and I'll get into the details of that just in a little bit, but hitting some of the big parts that are deficits for us. So I want to thank the Miller Park Zoological Board that's here. Talked a lot about what the safety issues are. So when you figure half of our audience is about knee high, do not necessarily pay attention to cars. And if you drove to the zoo, you have to cross a road twice. This project will take care of that problem, removing that road. We also hear about parking and lack of food being significant issues. This project takes care of those. And it also is the first infrastructure project that's from the zoo's plan from 5 years ago, hitting all those big things. Next slide, please. So again, I apologize for the coloration, but what we're looking for here, this is the overall concept. So if you remember, about 5 years ago, the zoo received a grant from the state to do the parking lot and concession stand. That grant was removed or pulled when Governor Rauner took office. And even though I still send in updates 4 times a year as of last week, I've been told there is no funding for this project going forward. So trying to get creative, find ways that we can pay for this project ourselves. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So what does this project have? Concession stand, as Ed mentioned, new entrance building roof, so the roof is 28 years old. I can show you the spots in my ceiling where water comes in. I've had to put cups of water on my carpet to take in the water. So it's a old building. Additional parking is a big thing here with this, and this benefits the entire park, not just the zoo. When zoo has an event, like Wild Lights, I was out working in the parking lot because our lot gets full before the event even starts. Zoo Spooktacular is our big Halloween event. It fills up before the event even starts. And I know that I've been told people come to the zoo, can't find a parking spot anywhere in the park, and they go home. And that's not providing a good service to our guests. Again, hitting safety, and I'll go into some of the details, especially like with the alternate. So next slide, please. I could not get a good picture of how bad the roof is. So I'm entering my 9th year at the zoo. This roof probably should have been replaced my 2nd year. We've just been dealing with it for quite some time, trying to get by until I could get this project done. Next slide, please. When it comes to HVAC, all of the equipment in there is original, so it's 28 years old, with the exception of 2 furnaces. We've replaced 2 furnaces 3 years ago. So the goal is to go in and be able to replace all the air conditioners and furnace. The furnace that's in the gift shop right now does not work. We have a CO monitor to just make sure we're keeping our employees safe. But that's a major concern that we have. Next slide, please. But concessions is a big one. So we'll have a window for, basically it's attached to the gift shop. just on outside of the gift shop with a window facing towards the park and a window facing towards the zoo. So you don't have to be inside the zoo to buy something, you can be outside. So on really hot days, if it's 95 degrees, the zoo's not really busy, but the spray park is full. So it gives an opportunity to allow people to come to the park and stay in the park all day. This is a park that people can and do stay all day, except I've seen a family leave and come back with McDonald's or something like that. So they wouldn't have to leave the park with this. So a pretty simple concession stand idea. We're not doing steak. We're not doing, I almost said salmon, but someone told me you should do salmon at a concession stand to raise your price. To make more revenue, but I'm not sure we're quite there. Staff have expertise. Anthony Nelson is here, the business manager for the zoo. He was the GM at Pheasant Lanes for years, multi-million-dollar facility. So I know we've got the expertise on staff. Next slide, please. And then we go into what else. So the idea is if everything goes absolutely perfect, bids come in low, there's a lot more things the zoo entrance needs. For example, it's the original carpeting. We've replaced what's in the gift shop, but it's 28-year-old carpeting. And you can go in my office and you can tell it's 28-year-old carpet. There's places where the glass panels are really a big eyesores, and that's the first thing you see when you walk in the zoo. And as you can believe, that entire building does not have gutters. The architect who designed the building did not like gutters, thought they were not pretty. And so there's no gutters on that building. So just the little things we're asking for, but some little things like the gift shop lights, we constantly have issues. We've had near fires from the gift shop lighting system that we have. It also gives us the opportunity potentially to fence off what's outside in the park now where the old playground used to be. That's in the zoo's plan, that's all slated to be future zoo. At the very least, short term could give us some green space for us to do large events. So next slide, please. So when we get into the zoo's business plan, so how can we pay for this project? So business plan is based off of per caps, so the amount of money we bring in per person. So we're projecting a $1 a person per cap. These are zoos that we put on here that are very much relatable to us. The size of the community is is relative to us. It's almost impossible to relate the zoo size to others because we're the small zoo, second smallest zoo by land in AZA that's accredited. So there's zoos on there. Binder Park Zoo, I believe, is an 80-acre zoo, but it's in a smaller community. So we tried to find zoos that were in smaller communities and as comparable as we could get. So by going off $1, the average up there is $1.67. Again, we were trying to be very conservative. And even as we went through the numbers a second time over the last couple of months, we feel it's very easy to say we're going to get $1.10. From every person who walks in. That's just the zoo side. That's not counting what's coming in from the park side. So that's where we say we feel we're being very conservative from a business perspective. And next slide, please. And then when we talk about what the total amount is, we're using $10,000 from the park. So $10,000 worth of sales from the park side. With $61,000 expenses, leaving about $85,000. Again, we're being very conservative. The numbers we ran just recently puts us around $97,000 in profit. So the first year should be our worst year in theory because people are just getting to know that we have foods. People have been, for decades, been bringing their food, and having a picnic at the zoo. Once we have concession, you won't be able to bring your food in. So that'll be an educational and marketing piece we'll have to encounter. Next slide, please. We talk about funding. So, like I said, this project pays for itself in less than 15 years. Again, being very conservative in numbers. We're going to utilize $400,000 from park dedication. So that is neighborhood park area 4, which the zoo is in, and the zoo's parkland dedication. There's more than $400,000 there. We can borrow it. We're going to pay it back at 1% because we feel it's important to leave money there for future generations. And then borrow the $500,000 from a couple different sources are possible. So from the general fund, from a financial institution, we're leaving that fairly open to see what is in the best interest at the time. Tonight's vote is nothing. No funds are required for this vote tonight. We will bring back two things. We'll have a design contract to hire an architect to do the design work. That could be as early as January if we get a positive vote tonight, and then a construction contract. So that's when the money would be assigned or approved by the council. This is just idea, proof of the project tonight. With that, I'll open up for questions.
Questions of Mr. Tetzlaff. Alderwoman Schmidt.
Just wondering a little bit about staffing of this. I know you said you'd use existing staff, and every time I'm there, you are just crazy busy. And so I'm wondering, is it seasonal, possibly?
We'll most likely have seasonals. We will have, Anthony will oversee it as the business manager. He oversees all of our cashiers. Our gift shop manager will also have some authority in that area, but we're mostly going to run with seasonals.
Okay. Maybe.
Other questions?
Yeah.
Alderman Matthey.
I was concerned about the staffing too. I have a little background in food service, and there's a lot that goes into, well, and you know, Anthony, there's a lot that goes into particularly a lunch rush and the chaos that's involved in that. So I have definite concerns around staffing. Mostly though, I'm wondering why this isn't part of a larger CIP conversation, and I'm concerned that we haven't had that in the greater scope of things yet. I don't even know every project that's on that right now, and so I'm waiting to see that. And I'm concerned about making a decision on this outside of knowing what everything else is on that and how we're going to address and possibly finance those particular projects. I'm not against it, but there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of moving parts right now, and we haven't seen all the price tags attached to those.
Perhaps I could help you a little with that, Alderman Matthey. And in this very room at Wednesday at noon, we're going to have the opportunity to show you those other projects that are in the capital improvement program. And the reason why this is different than those, all of those that we're going to show you are unfunded. They don't have a fund associated with them. The reason this one is different is, and this is not a capital improvement program that's associated with the other one, is this one we do have a funding source in that it will pay for itself. So it's different than the other ones that I'm going to show you here on Wednesday.
Okay. I mean, that's a great answer. I just, there's a lot, so.
Alderman Sage.
Thank you. Jay, just a quick question. If there are groups, of kids who still want to bring food in, bring their lunches in, they'll still be able to do that, right?
Not once we have a concession stand, no food, outside food will be brought in if the concession stand's open.
Alderman Milawambwe.
Jay, thank you. Are you going to continue to pursue a grant eventually?
I'm looking every day for grants for our entire department of any kind. I receive a couple of emails that I go through every single day that has federal funding or any kind of funding. I'm always looking for ways to fund our stuff, knowing that in this case, sometimes we just got to be creative to fund our own things. So I'm always looking.
Okay. Well, thank you. And, for the record, I would say that I definitely support this. I know several years ago when you came to us with the Flamingo exhibit project, the conversation in the community was very interesting. We had seen a number of signs with flamingos on them, but I think I'm very supportive of this initiative because you've shown us that you're able to deliver, and for that reason I would support this. Thank you so much.
Alderwoman Howman and then Schmidt.
Thank you. And thank you, Steve, for clarifying the community capital improvement part of it. Jay, I like the idea and applaud you and the staff on the Zoological Society for looking ahead and looking for ways to increase the revenue while enhancing the overall zoo and park itself. And certainly takes the wind out of some of the naysayers who question our putting money into quality of life projects because you're not looking for expenses directly from or financial support directly from the city. So thank you for that.
Welcome.
And I just want to say thank you for, I think, which will become a wonderful asset and investment to the west side of Bloomington. And with that in mind, Alderwoman Schmidt.
Thank you. This has just been such an integral part of the zoo planning for a while, and I really like the way that you've wrapped so many things around what was an idea about improving safety and providing food, and now you're really enhancing everything. I'm very happy to make a motion in support of this for the infrastructure projects that are presented here.
And I would like to second that. I see no downside to this at all.
I love it when I don't have to ask for a second. Okay, motion by Alderwoman Schmidt, second by Alderwoman Painter. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Matthey?
Yes.
Alderman Sage?
Yes.
Alderman Malamoy?
Yes.
Alderman Burgess?
Yes.
Alderman Painter?
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt?
Yes.
Alderman Black?
Yes.
Alderman Hallman?
Yes.
And Alderman Bray?
Yes.
Okay, we move on to item 8D, and we start with a very brief presentation by Kevin Cothe, our city engineer.
Good evening, thank you.
Mr. Cothe.
Last week you saw a presentation by our design consultant, KMA Design. Barbara Martin was here, introduced by Beth Wisman, who is chairperson of the Downtown Signage Committee. You saw an unveiling of a prototype sign, one of our prototype wayfinding signs that was also installed this week on Wednesday. You might have seen it across from the Government Center as you drive north on East Street. It was on the right side, roughly in the position it would be as if it was actually installed, but obviously we don't have the signpost for it to be installed on, but you could get an idea of that, even though while it was in the council chambers very large, once you see it on the street, it's not so large because you need that size to be able to see it. So tonight, I'm just going to follow up on that presentation with kind of some other information for you to consider as you decide to have us move forward with this project. Next slide, please. So the recommendation was option 2 based on public input that we got from both presentations done at the museum and other locations and also on the city's website. So as you saw last week, the overwhelming majority preferred the historical design, and within that they preferred the teal, and also suggested that we use a brick base instead of a stone base. So the recommendation from the Downtown Signage Committee tonight is to follow the public input. And of course, there'll be, as we go through the design process, to actually come up with the specifications for the signs. There may be some slight tweaking to the signs and the posts, but in general, we'll keep with that concept that everybody seems to like. Next slide, please. So the timeline for this, we do have money in this year's budget for not only the design contract to finish out the construction documents, but we also have money to begin installation. So what we'd like to do with your approval tonight is work starting in January on the construction documents, the specifications, and finalize the signage locations. And then our goal would be to bid the project in March of 2018 and have it back to you for award in April of 2018, hoping to award that contract and begin construction of May 2018. Obviously, that's all subject to getting delivery of materials and so forth for the installation of the signs, but rather an aggressive timeline to be able to use the money that's already programmed in this year's budget. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
If you could just review for us, just very, very briefly, the process of getting public input on this.
We had, besides over a year ago when we initially had the public come to this facility and have a brainstorming session, just in this fall, since the was turned back to the Signage Committee in September, if you remember. After that, we went back with our consultant. You had allocated another $10,000 for KMA Design to do some revamping of that proposed design. KMA did not use that $10,000. They said, you know what, we like to satisfy our customers, and we will just do this and revamp our designs to something more traditional. If you remember, the original proposal was more of an Art Deco look. After that revamping, we took it to the Museum of History, Snyder offices. It was at the Monroe Center for a while, in addition to being on the city's website for several weeks. And we directed everybody to be able to go to the website for an informal poll. And we had over 500 people vote, and over 84% preferred that traditional design, and almost 2/3 preferred the teal over the rust color of that traditional design. So,
thank you. Questions?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's weird without the light. I'm so used to just pressing the button.
You looked at me, but I didn't. Sorry about that.
I was trying to look at you with a questioning face.
Yes. Please,
yes.
call on me, please.
Thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you to the Downtown Signage Committee for all of their hard work. You know, I know that at least from my perspective, I got more calls about the signage than I did about any kind of tax increases or things that we've done over the past few years. People had a lot of feedback about the original design, and I appreciate the public outreach that's gone on since then, and the attempts to get more public feedback. I apologize I was not at the meeting last week, but I know that we appointed some new members to the committee, and I was looking over their credentials, and they have direct professional experience doing sign work like this, graphic design, working directly with organizations that do this type of work, almost like what our consultants do. And from my perspective, I think it would be prudent to have them weigh in on these designs prior to us taking any final action. So I don't know when the next Downtown Signage Committee meeting is. Steve, I don't know where you want.
Well, just a quick question. Has the new Downtown Signage Committee seen these proposals? Are they in favor of them, or have they any input?
No, they have not met yet. They were appointed, but we have not had them attend a meeting yet, so that would be at the next meeting. We do those every 2 weeks, and they are in the off weeks of the city council meeting, so it would not be this week, it would be next week. And have we scheduled that one, Kevin?
We're going to be, next meeting will be in January.
The next week is Christmas.
So I would like to make a motion that we delay this final decision until that meeting has taken place with the new board members. No disrespect to what's been done already, but just given the impressive professional credentials we've seen from our new appointees, I'd love to have them weigh in on this topic before we make any final decisions.
So let me understand, the motion is to table this until there's a new signage committee and there are 2 new people on with a design background?
They do have a design background, yes.
I pointed, I'm rephrasing.
Yes. So I don't want to give a date certain, because obviously I don't want to have to determine when the next committee meeting will be. But as my understanding, I talked to Steve this afternoon, is that as long as this is passed during this fiscal year,
Yeah, if I could.
Yeah.
You saw the timeline. It probably won't work, because if we can't come back to you until, say, the last meeting in January, the ability to get those documents prepared and bid this year and awarded, I don't think we'll be able to make that schedule. We're really tight the way it is.
Okay, I hear that. From where I sit, though, this is such a controversial conversation in terms of what people want this to look like and want to get the buy-in from the public. Given that these folks got appointed based on after some of that public conversation, I hear the concern on that timeline, but I'd really like them to weigh in first. So my motion's out there. Perhaps it will fail.
Is there a second to the motion? Okay, the motion dies of a second. Is there another motion?
Mayor, I move that, hang on, I'm going to say this properly, that we approve the resolution to adopt the downtown design and branding concept recommended by the Downtown Signage Committee, and authorize a change order in the amount of $28,095.10 associated with the current, with the contract between the City of Bloomington and Carestis Martin Associates, Inc.
Is there a second? Second by Alderwoman Schmidt. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Matthey?
Yes.
Alderman Sage?
Yes.
Alderman Malamoy?
Yes.
Alderman Burgess?
Yes.
Alderman Painter?
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt?
Yes.
Alderman Black?
Yes.
Alderman Hallman?
Yes.
And Alderman Bray?
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries, and we move on to our last official item of the evening, an action item. E, consideration of resolution supporting and funding the Be an Advantage Economic Development Strategy. And we have a brief presentation, approximately 10 minutes, by our Economic Development Coordinator, Austin Grammer, and a 20-minute council discussion. Steve, are you going in place of Austin?
I am.
Okay, sorry, Steve. If you told me, I am apologizing.
No, thank you very much. I came in at the last minute to do that, and I'm going to give this presentation on this item because I want to apologize to the council for the last minute change. We had a revised council memo that went out today, and I apologize because I did not communicate effectively with the staff as exactly what the dollar amount of this resolution was to be. We had talked about it being 1/3 of the amount of the yearly proposal for the Economic Development Committee and Council, but I didn't tell the staff exactly what that total amount would be, so we weren't certain of what the third was, and so I wanted to go back and correct that. And so what you will see now is in the revised agenda that the amount that is being requested is $123,867,000, and I wanted to go through why that was. What happened was we had in the economic development special budget funds for this fiscal year, $390,000. And if you look at the slide behind you, you will see that $390,000. And what the EDC did was they came back and asked us, since we have not provided any of that during this year so far for a variety of reasons, could we please fund them at least for the prorated amount for the remainder of the year, which would be January, February, March, and April. What we did in that $390,000, we already took out the amount for the Small Business Development Center, and so that amounted to $18,398. So that left the balance in the special budgeted funds of $371,000. So then when we take 1/3 of that to prorate it for the rest of the year, that's the $123,000, which we would propose giving in monthly payments over 4 months of $30,000 a month. Now, what that does is, of course, that still leaves 2/3 of that $371,000 in the budget, which we can roll forward to next year. So this is already budgeted, and it's in the budget now. So we'll only be using 1/3 of that. And could I have the second slide, please? And what Be an Advantage would like to do with this is they're proposing that the new budget for the next year would be increased so that they can do these 5 things. And these have been presented a number of different times, and many of you have probably been at functions where we saw this. But this is workforce development, quality of place and quality of life, marketing, entrepreneurship, and EDC investment. Now, that would be an additional amount for next year, so they were going to request $247,000 for next year, which is $147,000 in addition to the $100,000 that we currently give them. They had asked for this, and of course what I said was that I cannot in any way promise that, because that's out of a budget that has not yet been prepared for next year, and that is something that they will have to come back and ask you for, but I would try to build that into the budget for next year. But the amount that we would do this year, the $121,000, is at least a start on those things, so they can begin that this year, and then they can ask for that amount next year, which I would try to submit to you for your approval. What we do is we look at this, and you will see this some more when we're in here on Wednesday. We can't tax our way to success, and we can't cut our way to prosperity. The only way we can do is develop our way to advantage, and that is the process that we have been going through, and we have supported that by supporting Be an Advantage in and the Economic Development Council. And so what we are doing in this is we are furthering supporting that economic development concept by asking you to approve this additional funding for EDC for the rest of this year. And could I have the third slide, please?
Nope.
And what this does then, it shows you kind of the way that would be broken out. And I think being Advantage and the Economic Development Council could divide that up the way that they would want to. But what they've generally devised is that it would be broken down amongst those 5 things in this way. That's what would amount to the ask that they would have next year of $147,000. For this year, it would be somewhat less than that because we're only giving them a third of what we have in the budget now. And as you can see, that's what totals $123,000, which is what is asking for in this resolution. And as I say again, that's a third, or the prorated amount for the rest of the year, out of the amount that we had originally had, which is $390,000. And I told the EDC that I would present that to you for your consideration. And we have 2 gentlemen that I'd like to introduce to you, although they need no introduction. Kyle Ham from the EDC and Charlie Moore from the Chamber of Commerce, who would help me answer any questions that you may have about this request. Thank you.
Okay, we have approximately 20 minutes budgeted for questions and council discussion. Questions, comments? Alderwoman.
I think David had his hand up first.
I'm sorry, who? Dave? Okay.
Thank you.
I usually can see lights, sorry.
And Steve, thank you for delineating between the request to cover the remainder of the current budget year and then going forward. So I will vote for this in a minute when we vote for it. I want to say, though, that when we talked about this, and I think at a recent Committee of the Whole meeting, there was a lot of conversation about metrics. And I will tell you that I personally still find a lack of what I think are meaningful metrics in here, given the length of time that Being Advantage has been working. And so I just share that, trying to be as open and transparent as I can is I will be looking for much greater, more measurable actual metrics associated with some of these, much more so than what's in here right now, to ask to justify additional funding going forward in the next budget year. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to ask Kyle to address that here in a second, but I will tell you that in my conversations with my counterpart in Normal, they also are going to be going back and asking for more regular reports on the activities and the metrics, and what I have said is since they will be preparing that for them, we would ask that they prepare that the same thing for us, and we can get those same reports, and we've talked about that a little, and I'd ask Kyle if you'd like to...
Before you turn it over to Kyle, I do want Alderman to just add to Alderman Sage, and I saw some others nodding. That's the silver dollar question, pun intended, that we hear, a fair amount from constituents. So I think performance metrics are absolutely critical, not just to Normal, but to Bloomington moving forward. And Kyle.
Thank you, Steve, Mayor, and members of the council. I think I can speak on behalf of Charlie and myself. We welcome the opportunity to come before you on a much regular basis to talk about the work and the progress that's made. The Being Advantage is the strategy. And in that strategy, there's the multitude of work, of which I have taken components of that, and Charlie has taken components of that. We have weaved that into our strategic plan of our respective organizations. And in my strategic plan, I know Charlie's is the same, we have metrics that measure the work within the strategic plan. My board requests that, they demand it, and we do every meeting that I do every 2 months for my board. All of my reports are based off of the strategic plans with those set of metrics. We'll be glad to provide those after each one of our EDC board meetings. We've been working with the county on that as well to be more transparent. We welcome that opportunity. But also, I know Deanna Frauci was here. Deanna chairs the metrics committee of the Being Advantage, which Vasu will be sort of the staff and her organization of creating this new metrics, because within the Being Advantage, in addition to what I measure and what Charlie measures, there is pages upon pages of what our consultant has said. These are some of the things you should be measuring for quality of life, for entrepreneurship, for all the things that we've laid out. And they're actually purchasing or in the process of purchasing some software that will help us manage metrics. And we will use those metrics to gauge the success of the Being Advantage and the work of our two respective organizations. So we hear you, and we look forward to coming before you on a much more regular basis and providing those measurables.
Other questions? Alderman Matthey.
So, two questions. The first is the Exhibit A that's in our packet has the EDC investment of $50,000 lined out, but in the revised one, it's back in again. So I wanted to ask that question because that changes what the 1/3 number is that we just went through on this slide. It's back on this slide right here, but it's not in the original packet. And the second question I have is, what's that money for? Because in the EDC, or the BN Advantage original proposal that we were given, it defines what the money is going to be used for the other 4 categories, or they're all specifically bullet pointed out, and they have sub-bullets and everything on there. But that line item has no description anywhere in this packet to say what that investment is for and what it's going to be used for at all. So,
yes, I'll answer the first half of that, and then I'll let Kyle address the second half. The first half, I think you asked why that doesn't have the original number in it, and that was the $390,000, and that $390,000 was the amount that we had originally put in the budget for this fiscal year for economic development. And that was the number that we were starting out with, and that was why it was omitted from the first packet, because that was the number that I had told them we wanted to start out with.
No, I'm sorry, Steve. The line item that says EDC investment $50,000 inside of the original packet, it's struck out. Struck? That's right, where it's struck out. And it's not removed, which makes the total, instead of 123,867 there, it makes a total 97,000 in the packet. So I'm just curious, it was 50,000 was not in our packet, it was actually removed, and then it's back in here.
Yes, and that's because when we went back and put the 123,000 back in as the third of the 390, we broke it up amongst those 5 categories, and that put the $26,000 back in EDC investment. And we put that there because that was what was left after we took the total 1/3 out of the 390. We could have put it somewhere else, but we put it in there because we didn't adjust any of the other ones. We could have adjusted one of the other categories, but we just put it in there so that it totaled the 1/3, which is 123,000.
I can, I can answer your question about the increase of EDC investment. Predominantly, those funds will go towards attraction. So for example, we're in the process of getting ready to purchase a $15,000 software that will turn to $20,000 software at the end of the year because the price is going up. And what that software does is it takes almost every business across the U.S. and internationally and prioritizes them based on target market. They prioritize them based on highest likelihood of expansion, highest likelihood to move to Illinois or the Midwest, based on workforce needs, a whole calculation. It's a very in-depth software tool, but that tool alone will allow us to start proactively going after businesses to move to this community. We also, I recently went to New Orleans for a site selector conference. It was only 40 of my counterparts from around the country that had the chance to sit down individually with site selectors. The only reason I went is because one of our investors helped pay for that. So simply attraction, the ability for me and our team to get outside the community, to talk to businesses, to convince them to come here, that is what that increase of investment is built around attraction.
Okay. And you might not know the answer to this, but where on that particular line item are the county and the town at? Have you gotten any feedback from them at all?
We have been in conversation, almost identical types of conversations that we've had with Normal than we've had with you. We are continuing to work with the town of Normal for their consideration of almost similar funding, if not identical. And we're also working with the county. The county is a little bit different scenario. I think that's going to be a longer conversation down the road, but we encourage them to continue to think about investment.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Just to follow up. So I'm intrigued by the phrase similar but not equal.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
There are conversations with both of the entities. I think that the county, because of their budget considerations, is going to put much less money into this. The town of Normal is talking about what they may want to put in there, and they may go back to the 60-40 formula or something. But in any case, what happens is they will have to make their decision that they will make and move forward with what they would like to move forward. And we are not bound to agree or disagree, although we're communicating. But I think the point here is that what the EDC needs to do is move forward with some money. And so we are proposing that we would move forward, and it may not be exactly in coordination with them, and we may be out in front of them, and we will see what they do, and we would hope maybe they would follow our lead.
Yeah, but by similar but not equal is population?
Yeah, and I know that we've had some conversation recently about that, and I believe, Mayor, even you were on WGLT the next day questioning the wisdom of the 50-50 selection. My suggestion would be, let's get that ironed out going into the new budget.
Yeah.
Let's get that coordination set up so that this council can just kind of see the total investment there.
Sure. The request that I do have here before us that was for Normal is about 17,000 less. So it's not quite 50-50, but it's not 60-40. It's shortly in between. And I mean, for my purposes, the Bloomington and Normal have both invested the same amount for about the last 10 years. And so 50-50 or 60-40, that's for you guys. We'll certainly abide by however you guys feels appropriate.
Other questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Alderwoman Howland.
I knew you'd get back to me. So thank you. I do appreciate the work that's being done and has been done by the Bloomington Normal EDC, Be an Advantage, certainly our chamber, our Convention and Visitors Bureau. And I'll be supporting this investment. I do have some concerns and recommendations. First, since Iowano, I think that's how you say her name, was made her presentation in August of 2015, so 2+ years ago. Not much has changed with the Bloomington Normal relations. And if we aren't working together, I think it's going to be very difficult, or more difficult, for you to attract new businesses to the region. So I'm not sure what the EDC and Be an Advantage can do to help with this relationship, but I would certainly encourage that. I would also like to see us talk about bringing our EDC coordinator and Normal bringing their EDC coordinator under the same roof, same building, so that we don't have this, where's it going to be? It all comes to the same place. I have a concern about the overlap between EDC, the chamber, and CVB, and I'm wondering what the appetite might be to have them housed in the same building. It wouldn't reduce everything by 1/3, but it would certainly, I think, would help with increased communication. Could reduce some of the overhead if you've only got one receptionist or one conference room, that kind of thing. But as we saw in Conway, everything's housed under in one building, so it makes it a little bit easier.
Just to clarify for the audience, Conway, Arkansas, and the trip that...
Conway, Arkansas, yes. And I do appreciate in here that there'll be more information forthcoming, and some of the matrices. I know that you can't always talk about what you're doing because it's proprietary, but it would be nice to know when efforts are being made, and as much information as we can get, it would certainly raise my comfort level. So, thanks.
Anyone else? Or is there a motion on the floor?
I'll make a motion we approve as presented.
Okay, moved by Alderman Black. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by several people, Alderwoman Bray. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll unless there are other comments? Madam Clerk.
Yes.
Alderman Sage?
Yes.
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 Thank you very much. At this point, we have city manager's discussion. Mr. Rasmussen. There
Yes,
you are.
I just have one thing today to say, and I would like to thank Jay Tetzloff and the Parks and Recreation staff, and particularly the staff of the BCPA, for helping us set up in this different venue. And my suspicion is we'll be back here a couple times more like this, and we thank them very much.
I'm not sure that was as popular as you might have suggested, but I do want to thank everybody, including the BCPA staff, as I had earlier, and everyone for making this happen and making it as seamless as possible. Although I hate to say it, I do prefer the city hall that was designed in the era of Mad Men, to this, just because of the distance. And the only thing that I have, other than I know we are going to meet, some of us are being able to meet on Wednesday for a budget brief, is happy holidays, no matter how you celebrate the holiday season, and Merry Christmas. Oh, that's right, I do have another town hall meeting.
Wednesday.
Thank you.
Miller Park Pavilion.
At the Miller Park Pavilion, that's right, I did have an announcement. And that's from 5:30 to 7 o'clock. Be there or be square. Thank you.
Mayor?
Yes.
I believe I would like to offer some public congratulations to Mr. Karch, who I believe just completed all the work on his master's degree.
Master's degree.
So, congratulations.
Speech. No, kidding. Good, excellent. That's right, we're proud of you. Yeah, awesome.
We'll expect more work.
He's got all this time now, sure.
Other comments? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by several people. Moved by Alderwoman Schmidt, second by Alderman Black. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Adjourned. Thank you.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Yeah.